This is a very interesting question. It says, during the summer months, algae blooms on the surface of the Chesapeake Bay can block sunlight from reaching plants at the bottom. As a result, oxygen levels deplete below the surface and animal life dies off, forming dead zones in the Chesapeake Bay. What feature of the bay during the summer months prevent oxygen-rich surface water from mixing into the deeper levels? You may have noticed in your neighborhoods around Virginia Beach, we have ponds in a lot of our neighborhoods, and they're called retention ponds, and this is the reason why. In a lot of your ponds, you might have these fountains that are shooting water into the air, and the purpose of those fountains is to circulate the water. If you don't have a fountain in your pond, you might have noticed this algae growth that grows in a lot of the ponds. What happens is you put fertilizer on your yards, and the fertilizer runs down with rainwater into these retention ponds, and the algae on the top of it, they're just like the grass in your yard. They love that fertilizer, and so it's got everything it needs, including sunlight, and you get this algae growth on a lot of the ponds. Well, out in the Chesapeake Bay, the same thing can happen. In fact, that's why we have the ponds in our neighborhoods in Virginia Beach, is to keep a lot of that fertilizer out of the bay. But there's still other areas where fertilizers can get into the bay, particularly farmland out in the central parts of the state that's carried out by the Potomac River and the Rappahannock River, and it gets into the bay. And so you have basically fertilizer is hitting the top. But what happens is during the summer months, the Chesapeake Bay warms up. And because hot things rise, the top is heating up and hot things want to rise, so it just stays at the top. There's no turnover of the water. The hot stuff's not going to sink to the bottom, and the more it stays at the top, well, the hotter it gets. And the more the temperature difference between the top and the bottom of the Chesapeake Bay becomes. When these phytoplankton bloom on the top, they block sunlight from getting down to the bottom. And so this is called a thermocline. Thermo meaning temperature, and it's a greatly reduction in temperature as you go deeper. It's very hot at the top, and as you get down low, it gets cold very fast, and what that causes is it's very stable water. There's no circulation going on there's nothing hot to rise. The hot's already at the top. And so what happens is these phytoplankton explode. Now phytoplankton, they are photosynthetic, they give off oxygen. So there's lots of oxygen here at the top, but it's not making it down to the bottom where all the fish and the crabs are at, because again, the water is not circulating. There could be some plant life at the bottom that would be producing oxygen, but because this phytoplankton gets so thick towards the top, sunlight can't make it down to the bottom of the bay, and so those plants die off. And once they die off, the oxygen depletes at the bottom. Again, all that oxygen at the top, it can't make it down to the bottom. This water is very stratified. It's very stable. There's no turnover. And so that strong thermocline keeps all this oxygen at the top from getting down to the bottom, and it also, the phytoplankton top blocks the sunlight from hitting any plants that might have been down there. And once the plants die off, so do the crabs and the fishes, and they call them dead zones. And they were a huge problem in the Chesapeake Bay. Things are getting better as regulation. We limit the amounts of materials that make it into the bay. The retention ponds you see in your neighborhood are a big part of that regulation, where anytime you build in Virginia Beach within so many feet of the Chesapeake Bay watershed around residential neighborhoods, we have to have those retention ponds, which gives a temporary stopping place for those the fertilizers you put on your grass to keep them out of the bay. But ultimately, it's because the bay heats up so fast, and the top gets hot and stays hot, and the bottom stays cooler. And because the hot's already at the top, there's no convection going on there, and so they call it a thermocline.